If it isn't ceasing to live that you're afraid of, but never beginning to live properly, then you'll be worthy of the world that made you. This comes to us from Marcus Aurelius, as so many great messages do. And truly, I believe if you can become afraid of never living instead of just merely being afraid of dying, then you will be worthy to live this life. Now, to be afraid of death, paradoxically, is to be afraid of life, because life implies death. Death implies life. You cannot have one without the other. And to live this life cursing death is almost the same as living this life cursing life. Death is natural, so we should not be afraid of it. We should rather turn our fear towards the fact, the possibility of never actually living, of never actually living a proper life, a life aimed at justice, kindness, courage, discipline, things of that nature. A life where you will look back upon it with regret of the things you didn't do, the things you did, the things you said, the things you never said. Learning how to live properly is truly the chief task of life, I believe. And it's not an easy task. Seneca in one of his letters says, it takes a whole life to learn how to live. And then he follows that up with saying that, and maybe to your surprise, it takes even longer to learn how to die. I think living properly is something that is brushed past nowadays. Nobody really, because it's kind of an open end, it's kind of a subjective question. I mean, living properly to you may be different than living properly for me. The Stoics would say living in accordance with one's nature. We probably have different natures, so a proper life is different for each of us. But I think so many people don't spend enough time actually thinking about what the proper life to them looks like. They spend too much time looking at what society says is the proper life, and they live that instead of a life true to themselves. They live the life others expect them to live. And a lot of times, to no knowledge of their own. They're not aware of this. They don't give enough thought to it. They don't think the question's that deep, how to live properly. They think it's an easy question, a question that one can spend an afternoon pondering and get to the essence of and never think of again. But this is truly a deep question for each and every one of us that changes daily, weekly, monthly, that you need to return to and ask, what is proper for me to do today? What is proper for me to aim for in the future? Because this is a constantly changing question. And as Carl Jung said, your chief obstacle today is what you have become. If you are living dogmatically with the thinking that you did in the past, the thinking is outdated. There's there are new variables that have been added to the equation that you have not accounted for. And if you rely on the thinking you did 1, 2, 3 years ago for the present moment, then it's outdated. And all it is you're acting dogmatically. And all doctrine and dogmatism, I think, is relying on someone else's thinking. And someone else, you past you is somebody else. But that's all it is. It's relying on the thinking of somebody else, saying somebody else already did the legwork. Somebody else already spent years thinking about this. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to accept that. I'm going to accept the fact that they spent time thinking about this and accept that their judgment is correct. And that's how dogma is born. Never questioning the status quo, never questioning anything. So don't accept the doctrine that you've created for your life because it may just be outdated. And truly, once you can become afraid of never living properly instead of the fact of dying, I think you'll be worthy to live this life. Because living a life governed by fear is no way to live. Fear of death, fear of ceasing to exist. If you live a life governed by that fear, it's hard for me to imagine that you'll be worthy of anything special. Because you'll never take the leap. That'll always be in the back of your head. It's trite to say, but we're all going to live. No, we're all going to die. But some of us are never going to live.